So, Daniel, thank you for joining me. And first question I want to ask you is, how's married life?
Married life is very good. It's not entirely different from unmarried life, which is exactly what we wanted. We didn't want things to change. So
beautiful. So I did see your wedding ceremony, although I couldn't hear much of it. It was like but anyway, I was watching it and seeing the get up that you and Mariella were wearing. That was pretty interesting. And then the whole ceremony was very unusual, and I think that's probably perfectly appropriate for you guys. But it was interesting, yeah. Yeah,
because we're pretty unusual, the two of us. Nothing in our wedding was as it should be in terms of you know there's sort of accepted norms as to how people get married in a church, or they say that scripted vows and that sort of thing. This was a mishmash of everything that we loved. So we had a little bit of Hinduism in there. We had a little bit of paganism in there. We had a little bit of atheism in there.
Yes, you did. Now, it didn't look like there was significant amount of people there, no. But I don't imagine many of them were your friends, since this is in Australia. Was this all Mariella's crew and your mutual friends?
It was pretty much, yeah. None of my friends from the UK were able to make it, or in America, obviously. I mean, it's a long way to go, isn't it, over to Australia? Yeah. But it was funny. We were going to have the wedding outside. We had 3 massive marquees that we put up outside, and I put a floor down and everything. And then we had 2 massive storms with floods that blew everything away. And it was like we were battling the elements. And at the last minute, like just a day or 2 before the wedding, we decided this isn't going to work. We're going to have to move it indoors. So we ended up having our wedding in our front room, and it was quite funny because we'd attracted quite a lot of people, let's say, that we'd sort of picked up along the way, mostly ones from work and that sort of thing. And at the last minute, we had to drop about 10 people, which was a bit awkward.
Last minute, you had to say, no, you can't come.
Yeah, well, I got the job. I got the job of ringing them up and saying, sorry, you're uninvited.
Oh my God. Well,
but yeah, the ones that survived the great cull of 2024, we had a great time. There was only about 20 of us in the end.
It's intimate, I told my wife when we got married that I wanted to do, and I may have told you the story, that I wanted to get married Braveheart style. I call it Braveheart style. If you remember that film, Mel Gibson got married in the woods in secret, him and his wife and the priest. Right, that was all it was. And I told my wife that's what I wanted, and her mom was like, "Nope, nope." She wanted a big party and a big wedding, so that's what happened.
Well, we ended up with no actual family here.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, partly because of obviously the religious background, because we've kind of moved away from being of that particular denomination. So there's a little bit of not from our point of view, but from their point of view, they don't feel that they could come along, especially when we've got like a pagan witch doing the ceremony.
Let me ask you this question. As far as Mariella's religious beliefs are concerned, I get the feeling that she's a little bit like new agey. Maybe there's some of that going on. Maybe I'm reading into it, but I get that feeling.
Yeah. It's kind of, we've nailed it down to a kind of spiritual atheism, if there is such a thing.
And how does she define that?
The universe and a connection with nature and everything that is.
I like it.
But there's absolutely no kind of religiosity there at all. And I think that's kind of the direction I've ended up going a little bit as well. Maybe not quite as new agey as she is, because she's into all of her crystals and, star signs and moon phases and...
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost count now of the amount of time she says, it's Mercury retrograde again. I'm like, oh, shit, is it? That's bad, apparently.
I'm not knocking it. I just, it's beyond me. Most of that stuff's beyond me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for me, jury's still out. I am perhaps a bit more sceptical of those things, I think, but at the same time, I'm also aware that some pretty amazing things that happen sometimes. Can I tell you a quick story about
Please.
Something really weird happened the week of our wedding? So we were battling to get these marquees up and this floor down, and everything literally kept getting washed away. I spent like a day putting everything up. We went out for half an hour, got back, and it was just gone. Like floods everywhere and the marquees all ripped apart and everything. And I did that I rebuilt it about 2 or 3 times, and I was getting this distinct feeling that someone somewhere was saying, don't do this. You need to move it inside the house and have a more intimate wedding.
Mm.
It sounds a little bit woo-woo, doesn't it? I had a friend who I've spoken of before, a guy called Peter, who took his life back in March, committed suicide. And you recall I had that very strange, it was only for a day, but I had that very strange feeling the day after he died, that there was like a connection there, and I was getting these like really strong messages through.
Yes.
And one of the messages was, I've gone, but I'm going to be at your wedding. And Mariella kept saying like for, months leading up to our wedding, oh, Peter will be there, And I was a bit sceptical. But on the week of the wedding, I didn't even notice this. When I was setting everything up outside, there was a monarch butterfly that was following me. I didn't even notice it. Mariella saw it and just thought, oh, I wonder if that's Peter, like you do. And like I say, I didn't notice it. But the last, that last day when we decided to move everything indoors, I was moving stuff backwards and forwards. And this butterfly would not leave me alone. I was like walking from the garage to the house and back, carrying things. And it was like following me within a foot.
Wow.
And I don't know, I just got this really weird feeling. It was like, is there something in this? This is very, very odd. So I told Mariella, and she said, oh, yeah, that's Peter. That's definitely Peter. All right, so we did what we did anyway. And it's interesting because we've had a few little weird things happen since he died, like mildly paranormally sort of things that have happened in the house, but always specifically in the area that he used to sit. And it kind of felt almost like something was guiding us to be in that area, where he used to be, so that he could be at the wedding. I don't know if that sounds really, really weird or not, but that's kind of how it felt. Anyway, we did the wedding, had it indoors, did my speech, best man speech, and I mentioned about Peter, and I mentioned about the butterfly, and I had this overwhelming feeling. It wasn't grief. It was like something had just gone through my chest and pushed everything out through the top of me. It was not sadness, almost the opposite of that. And I was just like kind of overcome with emotion, and I kind of had to walk out the room, and I went outside, and a couple of friends came and joined me, and they were quite touched as well. And I said, "Oh, it's Peter," And the sun was just going down at the time, and I'd put all these fairy lights up around the garden, and there was this one strip of fairy lights which was not on, completely dark. And my mate said to me, "Oh, your fairy lights have gone out." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird, because I have turned them all on. Very odd." And I'm still banging on about this butterfly, and I thought, all right, I'll walk down this embankment and go and check the power's on it, yeah? And literally, as I did that, this butterfly reappeared just out of nowhere, and it flew the length of the fairy lights. And as it did it, all the fairy lights came on.
No way.
Yeah. Yes, way.
And it was dark.
It was dark. All the other lights were on, but this strip came on, so it was like all the way along, and then it just flew off, and that's the last I saw of it. And I was like, oh my God, is that really a thing or not? I don't know.
So I'll tell you this. When you were queuing up this story, I had a similar story flash in my head. I had these friends when I was in school. They moved from California around. I was in middle school age, and we were good friends, me and my sister, and it was two twin girls, Kimberly and Kathy. And when we were in high school, they died in a car accident. They got hit by like a truck at a railroad crossing, and they both died. Terrible. And me and my buddy Brian went to his grandpa has a cabin out in the woods. We went out there just to be by ourselves. I used to date one of the girls, and he dated the other. And we saw these two butterflies. I swear. While we were out there, we saw these two butterflies. I don't know if they were monarch. It's been too long. I don't remember. But they were two identical butterflies, twin butterflies. And they wouldn't leave us alone while we were out there. And I'm telling you, this story came into my head before you started giving me the details of your story, and that is just shockingly strange.
So you started thinking about that even before I told you about the butterfly?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't know if you believe me, but it's the truth.
Oh, it's strange. Weird. It's strange but true.
Strange but true.
Indeed.
It could be that, or it could be...
It must be true, 'cause I heard it on the radio. It must be true, it must be true.
That was cracking me up, Daniel. And the more you played it, the more funny it became. All right, so I want to ask you, since you told me you were building your own server for your podcast radio program.
Yeah. I'm
very curious about that. First of all, I'm impressed that you know how to do such a thing. Clearly, you're more techie than me, though. But I'm just, and I have no idea what that involves. Do you have one of those server stacks at your house with?
No, so it's not in my house, because if I did that, you'd then be reliant on the incoming signal. You know, the broadband or whatever, and that's always the weakest point. So the server itself is at a data center, but you can requisition now pretty cheap servers. I've got one. It cost £12 a month.
Oh,
yeah. It's got like 16 gig of RAM, 8 cores, and I think it's got something like about 500 gigabyte of space, which I worked out is about enough for 7 years worth of shows. So keep me going till I'm 62. Yeah, so basically what I've done is I've ordered that, and it gives you like a root login via. Do you remember the old terminals that you used to type at in DOS?
Oh yeah,
remember that sort of thing? Yeah. So what you can do, you can open a terminal like in Windows or in my case Mac, and you can type like SSH and then the IP address of the server. And the password, and it basically gets you in a command prompt line, and then you can do stuff. And I'll tell you how I've done it, because I didn't really know a lot about how to do it. ChatGTP. Yeah, I've just got ChatGTP, and I'm like, what's the command to set up a web server? And it says, oh, do this. Oh, okay. Then.
Wow.
Do this. So yeah, I've set up the web server so it can serve like the actual front end website, you know, the web pages. I've set up a thing called Icecast, which is a free streaming service. So basically what you do is you go into the command line and you type install Icecast or whatever. And then what you can do, you can connect to Icecast via, like I'm transmitting at the moment, obviously to you via my mixer and my sound equipment and what have you, to whatever system we're using here. But you can actually set it so you can stream directly if you want to the server on the IP address. So that's really good for things like doing radio shows, like live radio shows. You can do that. We do me and Mariella do a radio show every Monday at 7 with music and everything. And then when you've recorded your shows, you can upload all the shows to the server using FTP, dragging and dropping onto the server. And then there's another thing called FFmpeg, which you install. And it basically just looks at the shows and plays them in rotation out through the server. So it's like you've got like a permanent radio show playing.
Oh, I see.
So, but yeah, I've set all that. It's all, apart from the actual server itself, it's all free software.
Wow. That's impressive. It looked good.
Well, it's saving money because, like, I don't know about you. Have you noticed so many services these days, they've gone down a subscription model?
Yep, absolutely.
Does my head in. You used to be able to buy something and it was yours.
Sure that money keeps coming.
Yeah. Yeah, now I've got a subscription for this, subscription for that. So I've basically cancelled all my subscriptions, like my podcast subscription. I used to push out via podcast.co, and radio shows used to go out via Mixcloud, and I've dumped all of that now. I'm producing my own, I've got my own server, pushing out my content, on-demand content, and you know how you can create an RSS feed, which you then just directly upload to like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. I'm just doing that now.
Beautiful.
So apart from my costs now are £14 a month.
Can't beat that.
Pretty good, isn't it? I've had an idea actually. Well, I've had a couple of ideas. I don't know whether I can run these past you.
Oh yes, please do.
So the first one is, because I know you wanted to get onto some of our like scientific stuff that we've been talking about and religious stuff and what have you. I wondered whether at some point you and me should write a paper on this together.
Absolutely. Well, what do you want to do with the paper, though? You're talking about publishing it somewhere?
Well, I don't know. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. But you know how we were talking about this theory of what we were calling oscillating non-duality?
Yeah. Yes.
I went on ChatGTP again, and I ran our conversation that we've been having over messaging through ChatGTP, and I said, "Is this new?" And it said, "Yeah, it kind of is. You've come up with a new idea." Ooh.
I was very impressed by that.
I also asked if it thinks we're clever, and it said it does. I know.
I've known that the whole time.
What, that we're clever?
Before we get too far into this, because this would probably be the meat and potatoes of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you a couple things. So I noticed a couple of instances, one of which was, I think it was a tweet or something that you put out about being frustrated with the amount of effort you're putting into the content you're creating, but just the very, very meager uptake you're getting from, the audience. And I don't know whether that's Twitter specifically or whether that's, a kind of a broader statement. And I feel the same frustration. I've been doing this Two Tongues podcast for 4 years. It'll be 5 years in February.
Yeah.
And it's still, the numbers are disappointing. I'll say pretty consistently. I mean, things are getting better little by little, but it's disappointing. And I don't know when to stop the fight or when to make some changes. But I just noticed some of that frustration from you, and I think maybe once before as well.
Yeah, I have actually made some changes recently. So I think our situations have some overlap, but I also think there's a significant difference, and that is that when I first started my podcast, it was very, very specific about my journey from leaving religion, particularly Jehovah's Witnesses. That had an almost instant audience, and it was an audience that were going through or had been through similar things, many of which are lovely people. But something I noticed about the XJW community is there's also an awful lot of toxic people. They're people that are broken, basically, as a result of, the trauma they've been through. I totally get it. But it's like they don't want to move on to anything else. They want to just stay in that position of moaning about what's happened. And while ever I was producing content that was all about why they're justified to keep moaning about the situation they find themselves in, and they are. I was getting viewing figures, fantastic viewing figures.
Right.
But I'm kind of one of these people that once I've said what I want to say, I don't really want to keep going over it. You know, I want to move on to something else. So, and I did. I started moving the podcast in the direction of more kind of spiritual and philosophical, metaphysical things, rather like you do. And for me, I found that the audience that was following me just wasn't interested.
So what happened then when you started changing the content? Did you just see the numbers start to drop off?
Numbers dropped off.
Were you getting like bad feedback?
No, not bad feedback, just numbers dropping off.
I see.
Like drastically, like tanking off a cliff. I also put that slightly towards, like, I was using Twitter when I first started to sort of get the word out about my channel. And there was, probably still is, quite a large ex-JW community on Twitter. And that's basically who all my followers were. So I started actually seeing a lot of people unfollowing me when I stopped.
Really?
When I stopped talking about JW stuff and started talking about, I don't know, butterflies and tarot reading and crystals and all that sort of stuff. And then it kind of tanked even more when Elon Musk took over. Partly because I've got a feeling he's changed a lot of the algorithms now. I mean, I had something about 2,500 followers, and I'd make a tweet, I've just done a new show, and probably like 3 people would see it. It's not even about engagement. It was about they're not even seeing it.
I see.
So
now is that the reason why you just announced to me the other day that you're done with X, at least for now?
Not particularly. The thing with X as well that I've kind of noticed a lot, there's a hell of a lot of advertising. There's an awful lot of political discussion going on. I mean, yes, we have just been through the US election, so, you know, you kind of imagine that. But something I've noticed, and I don't think you'll agree with this, and it doesn't, you know, my opinion on this doesn't particularly matter because I'm not American, so, you know, I don't really have a say. But from where I'm sat as a British person who doesn't give a shit about politics, we can't even be asked to get our backsides out of bed to go and vote. American politics to me at the moment seems very polarizing or polarized.
Yes.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a middle ground anymore. It's either like kill all the lesbians or identify as a stiff breeze. It's like kind of it's like one side's like massively against anything that's not traditional or Christian, and then the other side is, and I'm not saying that's individual people necessarily, you know, yourself included, but in terms of like party representation, I don't know what I'd do if I was in America. Because I've been thinking, well, they're really far that way and they're really far that way. Where's the middle ground?
It's a great question.
Because I can see some policies of like both sides that I like, and then I can see other stuff which I just think that's mental, that is.
Yes. Well, all right, so I'll tell you a story.
That's partly why I came off X, because it was starting to get very toxic with people like slagging each other off and saying, I hate you, because whatever.
Well, it's in my opinion, it's been that way the whole time. Like from what I've seen, I don't know that I've seen much of a change since Musk took over. It's been pretty brutal. Twitter is pretty brutal. But you are right. There isn't a middle. There's no such thing as the center anymore in American politics. It doesn't seem. I consider myself a libertarian, not a Democrat or a Republican. Somebody who sits in the middle. Who thinks that it's important that the government be efficient and that they don't overtax the people and that they're responsible with their policies in terms of how it's going to impact business. Like, it's important to me that the government facilitates, gets out of our way and allows us to do business with each other and interact with each other the way that we want to. So I'm a libertarian in that way, but but libertarians are also socially liberal. So I'm I mean, my feelings are evolving on some of these issues, but I'm somebody that would align with a Democrat 10 years ago in terms of if you're gay and you want to get married, that's you. You know, if you want to have a sex change operation and you're an adult, that's you. You do what you do what you want. So that's where I fall. I think that's a pretty central position, and there is no party for me. I'm homeless.
That's kind of how I feel.
I think that maybe that's how a lot of people feel.
I was surprised though, because I thought from some of the things that you posted recently that I almost wonder, is he a Trump supporter?
Oh, I am a Trump supporter, and I am a Trump supporter, and I voted for him this time, and I voted for him last time.
Is that just a case of having to pick a party because you've got to pick someone?
You have to. So when I first started voting, Daniel, I voted Libertarian, and the Libertarian candidate gets 0.3% of the vote. And so then I have my father, who's an old school Republican, who tells me, "You're throwing your vote away." And I'm like, I'm standing for a principle, Dad. I'm going to go and I'm going to vote for this person who's never going to win. And he's like, "No, you're just taking votes away from somebody who might." And I guess I kind of came around to my dad's opinion on that at this point. Like, as long as the system is the way it is, I have to vote Republican or Democrat. And I think that the Democrats since Obama are batshit fucking crazy.
Yeah. I thought Obama was pretty good. I mean, I had someone the other day saying he was a warmonger and all the rest of it, but I always thought he was a reasonable kind of guy. But Biden, I mean, I don't know. He should be in a geriatric home or something. You know, it's like he's not fit to serve.
So I know that you're not particularly political, and you don't necessarily need to chime in on too much, I guess, whatever you're comfortable with. But the truth that I see from the political perspective in the United States, and people will roll their eyes and scoff at this, that the left, the Democrats, have become communists. And I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I think they are communists. They want a communist revolution in this country. And I'm old enough that I remember hearing about McCarthyism in the 1950s and the Cold War, and my parents and grandparents, doing nuclear bomb drills at school, and the Cuban Missile Crisis and all this sort of thing, the Cultural Revolution in China and hundreds of millions of people dying. In my opinion, communism is I don't have a strong enough word to condemn it as a philosophy. I think communism is one of these things that plays on human beings' good nature, that we want to take care of each other.
Yeah.
At least some of us have that good nature, and it takes that impulse and it bastardizes it, and it turns it into what ultimately becomes some sort of a dictatorship where people are dying and wealth is being taken from regular people who the communist revolution is supposed to be lifting up. They're the ones dying, So I just see the risks of communism as being far too high to even pretend to play around with. And we have 48% of the people in this country voting for Kamala Harris, seemingly to me, are perfectly fine with that. So I don't know, as a Brit, where you fall. I don't really understand the British politics and labor and all this. I don't even know what it means, but it seems to me that the British are generally more progressive and liberal than your average American, and I just kind of think that might mean you guys are more. I don't know what word to use. That you're more willing to entertain socialist and communist ideas. I don't know. You tell me.
Your two main parties in the UK are your Conservatives and your Labour. They're your main ones, and it tends to oscillate between the two. Occasionally you get a long run. You get Margaret Thatcher, Conservatives went on for about 13 years or something. Then another time you'll get like Tony Blair, goes on for a long time, Labour. They used to be quite polarised insofar as like Conservatives was always about getting rid of unions. It was all about money and banking and it was sort of for the toffs, basically. And if you lived down south like we did, Conservatives, it was great, it was brilliant. But if you lived up north, it was quite deprived because they weren't letting any money flow out of London, basically. So, the miners and the steel workers and all that sort of thing were always struggling a bit. Labour, on the other hand, are the ones that, well, it's about labour, it's about the unions and the common man, giving power to the people and all that sort of thing.
Can I ask you about that?
Yeah, go on.
About the unions for a second, because I'm just curious. Now, please understand, I don't have any. This is not a contentious. Talking about politics is not contentious. It's certainly not between you and I. So feel free to speak your mind, and I'm going to try to be careful not to say anything too dramatic. But as far as the unions go, the perspective that I have, and I think a lot of people share, especially conservatives, that the unions served a very important function in the early part of the Industrial Revolution, when children were working 16 hours a day, getting ground up in the machines, and employers weren't providing health insurance, and there's all these things, right? So the people were able to band together and say, okay, if you're going to treat us poorly, then none of us are going to come to work, and you're going to be fucked. And they were like, okay, I guess you've organized, and now we have to take you seriously. And I think that's good. I agree. I think that balances the situation better, so that one side isn't going to be able to take advantage of the other so much. And I think that's good. But I think the time when that was necessary is long gone. And what I mean is the unions are so inflated. The unions, not only are they a mafia, and I'm not kidding you when I say that, the unions in the United States are a mafia. They worked with the mafia. Literally worked with the mafia. The unions are in the pocket of politicians, and you've got this weird incestuous thing where the money's going back and forth between the politicians and the unions, and the legislation's being written, and the strings are getting pulled in. It's just it's so incestuous. And I'm not saying that I don't see that happening from like corporations. Of course, I see that with corporations. I see that with the military industrial complex, just the same. But it seems like big unions are a problem, that they're destroying the working class in the United States, and I think they're probably doing that in the UK. So I'm very curious what you think about that.
Well, it has. You're dead right. It has changed. What you've got to remember is, going back a long time, a lot of the services were government owned. They were state owned. So things like your telephone exchange and your post office and everything was, the royal this and the royal that, and so, the labour side of things, they had their unions in place to kind of push back against, underpay and bad working conditions, because what governments are like. They try and run everything on a shoestring. Everything was government run. British Rail. The railways were all owned by the government.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and
the National Health Service, right?
National Health Service. Well, that's still kind of government run, but it is starting to privatise a bit. But everything used to be government run, and then Thatcher, when she came in, she was Conservative, wanted to basically privatise everything, because she said, if we privatise it, everyone will get a better service, because there won't be just a crusty old government running it. There'll be multiple companies competing. It does make sense, but the problem was the unions didn't want it, because it's like, well, if it all goes private, what happens to our jobs? We're in these jobs that are going to last for our entire life, So they sort of all revolted against that. I mean, we had that's not the only reason, but there was that massive miners' strike. I don't know if you remember that in the UK back in the 80s. 90s, where it turned really, really nasty up north. Basically, Thatcher wanted to shut the mines down, the coal mines, which was a huge industry up north. Everyone was a coal miner, and start buying the coal from China because it was cheaper. And she flooded all the mines, shut all the mines down.
What?
Yeah, shut all the mines down, let them flood. And once they've flooded, once you stop pumping the water out, you can't reopen them.
Oh.
And everyone turned against that. all the miners, people died over that one. That was a massive thing. But yeah, she slowly dismantled all the government stuff and sold it all off to the private sector. And I don't think it's ever really recovered from that. So unions today, yeah, they've not really got you don't see the whole striking thing going on so much these days. Occasionally you'll get like a doctor's strike or a nurse's strike, but you don't get like a telephone strike anymore. I mean, back in the day, we're all going on strike because and it's like the whole telephone exchange is down, or the postal service stops working.
So in the U.S., the postal service is run by the federal government, but everything else that you said, the railroads, they're in the United States, they're private. Norfolk and Southern, they're private railroads. The telephone companies, and I'm sure there's like government contracts and government money, and it's all intermixed. But the telephone companies, Ohio Bell, that's like the old telephone company here, and they're all private companies.
Yeah.
So we've been running that way. It's just interesting to hear you say that. I actually didn't really understand that. Like I knew that about the National Health Service. And by the way, I heard, you may not know this, but I heard some astronomical percentage of the people in the UK work for the National Health Service. I don't remember the number, but it was like astronomical.
Yep. That's one of the few remaining kind of government run things, and if you can get a job in the NHS, you're pretty much set for life. But don't expect any decent money unless you're a brain surgeon or something.
I see.
Yeah, but it's like that. It's a lot of the government things. Schools and that sort of thing are all underpaid, and the option is there now to go private. So it's Labour. I mean, when Tony Blair came on, he coined a new term. He called it New Labour. And it was basically Labour, but almost indistinguishable from Conservatives.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so it's kind of whereas what I see in America is it's kind of polarised this way, and they're so different from each other now. It's unbelievable. In the UK, it's kind of gone the opposite way.
Oh,
they've kind of come together, and it's like, which do you choose? They're both like as good or bad as the other.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But there's not the extremes. It's like if you vote for Conservative, like the world ain't going to end. Vote for Labour, the world ain't going to end. I get the feeling in America like it does make a bit of a difference.
Oh,
who you go for?
So hold on, I have to ask you. I see these things on social media, so I don't know how much to read into it. But there's some things I've seen in the UK recently that have been terrifying to me, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. The first one is, I started seeing videos of people praying outside of abortion clinics, and they're not folding their hands. They're not speaking out loud. They're standing in front of this place. Apparently there's some rules that say you can't stand in a certain vicinity or protest, the abortion. But the police are confronting these people standing silently there, and they ask them, "Are you praying?" And if they say yes, they arrest them and take them to jail. So, have you seen this?
I have not seen that. No,
I've seen this many times.
Oh wow!
Even worse than this, maybe. And
well, that's quite interesting because the UK is becoming, generally speaking, quite an atheist country. It used to be Christian. It's becoming really atheist. I mean, one thing I did see recently in the news is that Prince William, he said that when he becomes King William, he doesn't want to be head of religion anymore, because we've got like the Church of England is the state religion, and traditionally, since Henry VIII, the King or Queen of England is the head of the church.
Listen, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So hold on.
Yeah.
So
generally speaking, you had to be a C of E. If you were the King or Queen, you were C of E.
Hold on. Is that so? The Anglican Pope is the King or the Queen?
Right. So yeah. So the way it worked was Britain up until Henry VIII. Britain used to be under the rule of church rule of Catholic Church Pope, and Henry VIII wanted a divorce from one of his many wives.
Yes.
And he decided the Pope wouldn't give him it. He said it was illegitimate, and so he said, "Right, okay, well, stuff you. I'm going to set up my own religion." So Church of England was born, and he allowed himself to get divorced and remarried.
Yeah.
And in doing so, he said, "I'm not only head of the head of state, I'm also head of the Church of England, and that is the the country's religion. And ever since then, if
story, Daniel,
ever since
the last part.
Yeah, well, ever since then, every king and queen since then has been C of E, not Catholic, C of E.
Church of England, you guys.
Church of England.
For those of you listening in the US.
Basically Protestantism, but it's like the English version of Protestantism. But yeah, William, see, it's starting to blur a lot because like the UK's had like a tremendous lot of people coming in from other countries. You've got your, like, Islam is overrun with people from, Muslim countries. Being that it was a Commonwealth, we already had an awful lot of Indians there, like Hindus, Sikhs, whatever. It's all part and parcel of the national sort of flavour, but it's such a melting pot now. And then, of course, there's a huge amount of people. C of E's basically on a day-to-day basis, Church of England people might as well be atheists because they don't go to church.
Right.
So, William has said, like, if I ever become king, I don't want to be head of religion anymore.
Well, I'll tell you why that worries me a little. Obviously, I just found out that was the case, so I should have no basis to be worried about this. But what worries me about that is if the monarch is not associated with a state religion, the thing that you just brought up a moment ago about the rise of Islam in the UK.
Yep.
I think without the state behind the state religion, there's a really significant chance that the United Kingdom becomes an Islamic country.
There is.
And I don't know how that makes you feel. But my perspective on this, and maybe we'll get into this in a little bit, I have basically withdrawn from religion completely, even Christianity, which I was very strong for Christianity at one point. But I see getting rid of religion is problematic because if you just said like there's no more religion, people have got such strong opinions about religion if they are religious that you could cause civil war. I don't like the idea of like Islam taking over the world, but I also don't like. I'll tell you what I struggle with. Like when I look at Trump. I've been seeing things in the news like Trump's endorsed this Bible. Have you seen that? Yeah. There's a Trump. It's called the Trump Bible. So there's actually a version of the King James Bible that's Trump's got behind. And I'm reading things about Trump is reintroducing prayer into schools. Presumably Christian prayer. I don't know if I'm hearing in the story right, but to me, there's Christianity, and then there's fundamental Christianity. The Baptists and all that kind of thing, kill all the gays and whatnot. And I don't know where America's going with that. I think it's a bad idea when you get religion behind any sort of politics. And that's what I see. I see America going down the route of being like really Christian. Get rid of all the Islamics. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that is a possibility. I think it's a distant possibility, but I can see it in like a the pendulum has been swinging left for so long in this country that the response, the correction, is bound. It's bound to be an overcorrection.
Yeah.
And so where I think you're right. I think there's a reasonable middle ground that is empty right now. It's been vacated. So when that pendulum starts swinging back the other way, there's going to be nobody in the middle to stop it. So there's a real possibility that we're going to see some extreme things happening on the right, on the conservative Christian front. I don't know what that might look like. But I think, like, as an example, the school prayer thing. First of all, I haven't heard Trump say anything at all about that as a matter of policy. But it is the case that in certain states, I just saw this. I don't remember what state it was. I just saw this, that they had a legislative action to introduce prayer back in school because it's not been allowed for some time, and it passed in that state. So now it's mandatory that Christian prayer is a part of the curriculum in that state. Not in my state, not in the country, but in one state. And could that happen more? Absolutely, it could happen more. Could we see crazy dramatic behavior from the politicians, like, taking shots at Islam. It's possible. It's possible. I can't say that it's not possible, but I still think it's a distant possibility. I think that cool heads will prevail. When it comes to the school prayer thing, I think, as an example, when I was in school, if I were to pray, I would be laughed at. I would have been laughed right out of there. I mean, I would have been such a nerd for praying in school.
Yeah.
When my parents were kids, I'm pretty sure they were praying in school as a matter of course, like it was normal for them. I would like to see the public school system permit prayer, but I don't want them to require it. So that I think is a reasonable, moderate position. I don't think you should make Jews and Muslims in the school pray a Christian prayer.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was a Christian actually on one of the forums I was following the other day, and she said the same thing. She said, I am Christian, but I don't like the idea that if we introduce Christian prayer mandatory into schools, that there's other people that are Islamic or Jewish or Hindu or whatever, they're expected to pray our prayers any more than we want to be praying their prayers. So I get that. But you see, this is the... I think we as humanity has found itself in this position where we are all religious or atheist, depending on, your flavour, but different people that are religious, and there's so much fragmentation with the religious views. And I know some people say, religion and worship and all this sort of thing is inherent. It's just something that, we feel a need to do, and it's expressing and what have you. But this kind of fragmentation of all these different, not even different beliefs. I love different beliefs and I love different spiritualities or lack of. I love the whole thing. But this whole sort of everybody in different camps where you're, follow Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism or Christian, or you're Democrat or you're Republic or you're Conservative or Labour. It's so polarising.
It is.
And I just don't, I get why it's like that. But I just, it seems to me ineffective. We've struggled like this for thousands of years and something needs to change.
Yeah, I think ineffective is a matter of perspective. What I mean is, at least in this country, and I'm sure it's true I want to say your country, but in the UK, your former country, that the putting everybody in boxes is intentional because it's polarizing, and that's what gets people to vote for sure, one way or the other. I think that when I was growing up, man, it wasn't like this. It was not like this. Now, even the racism, and this is going to be controversial maybe for you to hear, but the racism in this country, when I was all through high school, in the beginning part of my college career, was the best that I had ever seen it in my life. It was not a concern socially at all. There was like a tremendous amount of I would say a spike of interracial marriages and babies, in my neighborhood. It was like, it seemed to be going well.
Yep.
When Obama was elected, it started going downhill. Race relations started going downhill with Obama and have gotten nothing but worse. It has been a cavalcade of disaster. And it all seems to hinge on the politicians pinning the people against each other.
Yeah.
The more polarizing they can make us, the more certain they can be about how we're going to vote. And they don't seem to care if it tears us apart. They don't seem to care if it causes riots and property damage and death. They don't seem to care as long as you vote one way or the other.
Yeah. And that I think is the problem. I did a podcast the other day about free will with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how you can feel that you've got free will to vote. I can vote this way. I've got a choice, but ultimately you don't really have a choice. You don't really have a choice because you're just given options. This option, that option, the other. It's like when I used to tell my little girl when she was small, it's time for bed. Yeah. And she'd have like a massive meltdown. Don't want to go to bed, and I'd give her two options. You can either stay up for 15 minutes watching the telly, and when you go to bed you have to put your light out straight away, or you can go to bed now and you can read for 25 minutes. Let's make it, I'll go to bed now and I'll read for 25 minutes. She feels like she's made a choice. She hasn't. I've still got what I wanted at the end of the day, and I just feel like that's what politics is doing. You get Trump or what's his name, Biden, or the what's her name, Kamala
Harris. Yeah.
Harris.
Yeah.
You get that or that. That's kind of your options. You know, I had an idea the other day, and I don't know if anyone's ever tried this. They must have done, but tell me if this is a thing. In this modern world where you can actually, you know, at the press of a button, you can register your interest in something. Why are we voting for people anymore? Why don't we just vote on policies?
That's a great idea.
Why don't we just vote on ideas? You know, it doesn't matter who came up with the idea. I mean, Trump's got some great ideas. I think he's got some terrible ideas. The other side have got a few good ideas. They've got some terrible ideas. Why don't they just all give us the ideas and we go, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's rubbish.
I think that's revolutionary, man. I think that's a great idea. I thought about this a lot, man. When I was younger, I thought, how can we? Because elections are a popularity contest for like. This is the reason that I think, and I'm making this assumption. This is the reason why you said you think Obama was a good. I don't know. You didn't say good president, but however you put that. The reason I say that is because Obama presented very well.
Yeah, he did.
Very professional. Yeah. He was very deliberate. He was confident. He exuded authority. He was a great figurehead. You know, somebody like Trump, on the other hand, can't really string two sentences together. He's smart, but I don't think he has a lot of skills in terms of, persuading a large amount of people. You know, where am I going with this? I don't remember where I was going. I got lost in the details. Where were we?
Oh, we were saying about, why personalities and why don't we vote for policies rather than,
yes.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, I thought about this, like, why couldn't we, first of all, get rid of parties entirely?
Yep.
Because then you're going to get rid of those people that just vote R or D down the line. Get rid of parties, and then you also can get rid of. I thought, why don't we get rid of putting the candidates' faces or names out there? Why don't we have, like, those interviews where people are sitting in the shadow and they have the voice changing device? Why can't we have the debates like that? Right?
Yeah.
But your idea is even better.
Oh, thank you. Just put the policies out there. Do you want to like close this school or keep it open? Oh, we'll keep it open. Do you want the National Health Service to go private or not? And you could just have a button, couldn't you? And at home and go,
absolutely.
vote that. I don't know what the world would be like if we did that. It might be a total chaos, but it would be true representation, wouldn't it? Even if we all went to hell in a handbasket, at least we could say, well, the majority of us did vote not for that person, but for the policy. Because what tends to happen is you can vote a person in based on their personality or their promises. And then if they've got the power, particularly like if they've got like both houses, representation, Senate, whatever, or in the UK, same there. If you've got a majority, you've just voted them in for 4 years. They've got pretty much a free reign, haven't they?
See, this is interesting, Daniel. Yeah. If you voted on policy, let's just say 10 years from now, because I don't think this is like a far-flung futuristic idea, you wouldn't need a House of Commons and a House of Lords at all because listen, the people vote on the policy and then AI writes it all up, right? AI can do the best possible job of creating the most efficient policies, right? And you don't need any.
That's it. We've sorted it. We've sorted it out. Can we sort religion out while we're at it as well?
Yes, listen, we're approaching hour number 2, so we better get into religion. But before we leave the political domain, I did want to ask you, as far as Australian politics, have you figured any of that out living there yet?
I've just started trying to figure it out. Yeah. It's very similar to UK politics, as you would imagine.
Sure.
Very, very similar.
Okay.
What we have got here, I mean, I can't vote yet because I'm not a full-fledged citizen yet. I can't get that for another 5 years. But they don't. They give you an option where you don't just vote for the party. You can just vote for the party if you want to, or you can vote for the party plus choose who you think out of the party would be the best leader. So what you can do, you can actually vote for both parties. You can say, if I choose this, if I would have this party if it was led by this person, and I would choose this party if it was led by this person.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll never let that happen here. They'll never let that happen here.
I'll be Republican if somebody else is running it. I don't know, because that way you get the choice of the policies, but then if you don't like the person, you choose someone you think's more efficient or whatever.
Now, do you have any questions for a layperson like myself about American politics or the state of things over here before we change topics?
From an American perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's crazy? Like, is it like a little bit like, woo, everybody's like losing their shit? Oh, they're all... Because that's what he looks like to the rest of the world at the minute. It's like, what the fuck is going on over there? Like, we're all going to die.
Are you saying because Trump was reelected?
Well, not even just the fact he was reelected, just that, like, the US election itself from both sides was just like, what the shit?
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think we all agree on that. I'll tell you what, though, I think stands out, and I think this is a huge difference between Donald Trump's first administration and the one upcoming. And by the way, right now, I think Biden has I think the Democrats and Biden are playing a really strange game with Russia right now. I think they're doing it on purpose because they want to sabotage Trump coming in, which is very scary and very I just can't imagine why they're taking those risks. But what's different about the second Trump administration is this Department of Government Efficiency idea.
The DOGE.
Yes.
Putting Elon Musk in charge of it, aren't they?
Yes, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's from Columbus, where I'm from, here in Ohio, and he's basically my age, which is interesting, but a super duper smart guy. And when you look at what Elon did with Twitter, he fired a huge percentage of the staff at Twitter, and it runs far more efficiently and cheaper now than it did before. And if he can do that with anything at all in the federal infrastructure in this country, as a libertarian, I am so excited about this idea. Like the idea that he's going to get rid of the Department of Education, as an example, you might hear that, and a lot of people might hear that and think, why in the world would you want to do that? Education is so important. And the idea here is humbug. People who say that don't understand shit about American politics. America is a union of 50 states. Every state in the union is its own sovereign country, essentially.
Yep.
When you read the Declaration of Independence, it reads like that. When you read the Constitution, it starts to get a little different as things progress. They call it federalism. The federal government decided, well, it's the head honcho now, and the states have to bend the knee to the federal government. It was never that way in this country. For a long stretch of our history, that was not how it is, but it's become that way. And when the federal bureaucracy grows, a new department is created or a new committee is created, those things never go away. Those programs never stop. They just add to them and add to them. They become more expensive and more expensive.
Yep.
And the fact is, every state in this country runs its own education. There is a state Department of Education. Why do we need a federal Department of Education? Every state is doing it themselves. They're closer to their citizens. They understand better what needs to be done, what education needs to be rolled out. It's not a huge federal scale, so they can actually do things without the bureaucracy involved. Why do we want to add the expense and the complication of the federal government telling the states what they can and can't do? I think that's a terrible idea. Get rid of the Department of Education. Save the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Yes, that sounds like a great idea. This is the kind of thing that gets me excited about this new Trump administration. And honestly, it has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with Musk and Vivek and these people.
Yeah, and I'm kind of I'm a bit torn on that because there's absolutely no doubt at all that Musk, when he sets his mind to something, he accomplishes it. I want to build a spaceship. He'll build a spaceship. I want to go to Mars. I'll do it. I want to, I want to take Twitter over. It's going to cost me like 44 billion, but what the hell? I'll do it. I get that. I also, and I suppose it's a little bit my concerns with Trump as well. I kind of see somebody who is a little erratic sometimes. Like, God knows how they achieve anything, because like it's almost like just a scattergun approach sometimes. Oh, I'll just do this. I'll just try that. Let's try that. Let's do this, and even a little bit bullyish sometimes, oh, this is what I want. I'm doing it, I don't know whether to be worried about that or admire that, because like I say, they get results. Trump, he gets results. I'll give him that. When he decides he's going to do something, he does it.
Yeah.
My worry has always been when you put so much power into, and I agree, get rid of all the departments. I think there's way too many government departments. It's just ridiculous. It takes like years to get anything done, doesn't it? Simple little things like there's a pothole outside my house. Can someone come and fill it? It has to go through like 20 different committees to decide whether or not. It's ridiculous. Just get a guy.
There's a story about a lady, I think it was a lady, who was filling potholes in her neighborhood.
Yeah.
And
was
they
she
made
arrested?
her undo it.
Yeah.
Right?
What? Yeah.
What?
I know. But I do worry as well. I do worry as well that the world, the way it's going at the moment, is going to be run by about 4 or 5 people that have got money. Trump, Bezos, Bill Gates, whoever, Mark Zuckerberg. They've got the money, and I just worry that they might not have the ethics and the moral character to not screw this up.
I agree.
Was it Larry, the guy at Google, who started Google? He said, I don't know whether he intends to do this, but when he dies, he's going to leave his fortune to Elon Musk. And everyone's like, why would you do that? He's already the world's richest man. And he says, because, he's going to go and populate Mars and everything. I'm behind that. So I'm going to give him all my money as well so he can do it. And I'm just thinking all that's going to happen is we're going to go to Mars and fuck that up as well. At the moment, I sort the world out first.
I really like Elon Musk. I think he is, so of all the people that you mentioned, the Zuckerbergs and the Bezoses of the world, I think Musk is an outlier among them. I don't know. Did you ever read any Ayn Rand novels? Did you ever read Atlas Shrugged or
no?
Do you know anything about Ayn Rand?
Nope, not a thing.
So Ayn Rand was a Jewish lady that lived in Eastern Europe. I can't remember where. She immigrated to the U.S. In order to escape the Nazis, basically. And she came over here and started working in Hollywood. Like, she was working in film, and she ended up marrying a guy who was like an actor. But it turns out she's like an IQ of 150 or 180 or something crazy. Yeah. And so she starts writing all this stuff, and it's controversial. I have one of her books here. It's called can you see? It's probably backwards. Called The Virtue of Selfishness. And she had this philosophy called objectivism that she created, and it started out in her novels as kind of like the background of her novels. And she was writing fiction, but the fiction is like capitalist fiction. I don't know how to describe it. So the stories for Atlas Shrugged and some of these stories are like, it's like the one of them is an architect. His name's Howard Rourke, and he's got all these challenges, and he's poor, and he works his way, to the point where he's able to become an architect and start to design buildings. And there's all this competition and government obstacles, things holding him back, and he just keeps pushing through and doesn't take no for an answer, and he makes a name for himself. And that's the kind of story she tells, where the heroes are people who have a vision and move heaven and earth, regardless of how many people try to sabotage them. And there's always people like that in the stories. They move heaven and earth to make their vision happen. Yep. And it always struck me as like such a perfect hero story, better than like, Gawain and Lancelot, because it was like something that could really happen, in the modern day. And So that's the kind of stuff that Ayn Rand did. And Elon Musk, to me, is like a hero from one of her novels. Mm-hmm. Elon Musk is like Howard fucking Rourke. You should read Ayn Rand. I'm sorry. I go down a rabbit hole.
I'm still pissed off for him messing Twitter up. me and Mariella met on Twitter.
Well, that should make it special for you. We got. Yeah,
it's not Twitter anymore. It's dead, isn't it?
That's true. Well, we can still call it Twitter.
Can we? Can I talk to you about? I've got two things. Main things I wanted to sort of run past you today, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
The key one was the move in my thinking when it comes to spiritual things, because I've had this sort of journey where I went from JW to Christian to Pandeist, Advaitist, and I'm sort of moving a bit beyond that now.
Yes, I want to hear how that started. So please.
Yeah. So. I know you and I have had some deep discussions recently about the nature of God, and I know last time I was on your show, you made a comment along the lines of, it seemed like I'd thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Do you remember that one?
I do, and I recognize that that stuck in your craw a little bit. So let's talk about it.
It didn't. I wasn't offended or upset by what you'd said with that. It just made me like take a second think, like, oh, have I oh, what have I done here? Like, because when someone like yourself, you have a friend, and I respect your opinion, and you say, oh, it seems like you've thrown the baby. I'm thinking, well, I don't want to throw babies out, I mean, babies. I think my comment was, I don't think there is a baby. I grew up with the traditional notion of God. There is this guy sort of sitting on a throne somewhere with long grey hair, judging everybody, and he's allowed to do that because he's perfect and he's loving and he created us. And so why is there so much evil in the world? Oh, he gave us free will, and then this angel turned bad and became the devil, and he's responsible. But God wants nothing but good for you. Mm-hmm. Very traditional sort of idea. Not only does he deserve worship, it's you should want to give him the worship because he's such a brilliant guy, sort of thing. My experience of religion as a Jehovah's Witness was not a great one. There's a lot of judging, both in and outside of it. There was a lot of fear, a lot of, if you do this, you should feel guilty, and there was no hell, but there was Armageddon coming, where you'd all die at Armageddon if you didn't do what was right.
I don't think I knew that there was no hell in
there's no hell in. So in JWs they say that when you die, that's it, you're dead, and there's one of two choices. You either get resurrected back to life on the earth in the future after Armageddon, when the earth is a paradise, or if you're one of the lucky few, you go to heaven, and they say that's limited to 144,000 people.
Of course it is.
And they don't believe in the Trinity and so on and so forth. So it was always very judgy. It was always Jehovah this, Jehovah that, Jehovah this, Jehovah that, But it became more so in my sort of last few years. I started to see it becoming very, very culty. The leaders were now sort of on TV. They got their own TV channel. And
oh, God.
Yeah, and they start becoming the face of it, and it's like I've never really liked that. When one or a few people sort of get all the power, all the control, it just don't like that at all. But I was a big Bible believer. I believed the Bible, and I studied the Bible. Like, perhaps, in fact, I would say more than most JWs. I studied the Bible. I read it all the way through. I looked into the Greek, the Hebrew, cross-referred it with other translations. I did my research. And I started to see at the time that Jehovah's Witnesses, what they were teaching was not according to the Bible.
Was there something in particular that stuck out?
Yeah, so it's obviously a doomsday cult, you know. In the past, they've sort of set dates for the end of, you know, Armageddon's coming in 1975 or 1925 or by the end of 1999 or whatever. Yeah, and just little things like that. You look at the Bible and it says you don't know the day or the hour. There you go. That's what the Bible says. You don't know. So why are you making stuff up, you know? The Trinity, I mean, I wouldn't say I sort of got really on board with the whole Trinity idea, but I could see support for it in Scripture.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sorry to stop you here, and I think we've talked about this, but just to clear it up for my own self, if the JWs don't believe in the Trinity,
yep,
and the person of Jesus is seen as is that the Archangel Michael? Is that what they say, or is that
Archangel Michael? Yeah, they say that basically God, Jehovah, is God, and he created Michael the Archangel, and then loads of other angels as well, and then later he basically took Michael the Archangel and put him inside Mary to be born as Jesus. Yeah,
I had a guy on the podcast. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. The one I did with a fellow named Chris Zuba. He has a some kind of blog called Yahweh's Janitor.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a very interesting guy. Why am I telling you about him? There was something I was going to bring up.
The Trinity. Michael the Archangel.
It'll come back to me. Keep going. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, but I started to see that there were discrepancies with it, and of course when I questioned it back in 2004, I got shut down, kicked out of the religion, denied my family for 3 years, and all my friends. And I would say at that point I was identifying more with born again Christians. That's who I felt more of an affinity with. But I didn't go down that route. I went back to Jehovah's Witnesses mainly to get my family back, and then I spent the next 10 years kind of basically being an undercover Christian, if there is such a thing. You know, silently disagreeing with everything and silently, you know, kind of trying to sort of teach the truth of the Bible without getting caught, sort of thing, you know, for 10 years. And it just did me head in the end. So when I left the second time in 2019, I was very firmly in the Christian camp. But then
so when you were doing your Bible studies,
mm-hmm,
or when you were leading, you were injecting in what you thought was legitimate theology, even though it was contrary to what the JWs would teach.
Yeah,
good for you, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I did the whole sort of went down the, even with the Christianity. I think I'm very similar to you. Like even things like the Trinity, I kind of took a mystical view on that. You know, I went down the whole line of, you know, if there was a God, that God would be, by definition, be unmanifest until it did something. And when it did something, that would be the very first creation, if you will. And that very first creation, according to Scripture, is the Word, the expression of God. And the Word became Jesus. So yes. I sort of had that, and you know, John 1:1, for example, I didn't have any problem with the King James translation. In the beginning the Word was, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, whereas the JWs would say, and the Word was a God. So they've created like two gods all of a sudden. It's like, okay. That was that John 1:1 was in line very much with like Greek thinking of the day.
Yes.
Yeah. So a little bit of a mystical spin on it. I mean, there were so many different flavours of Christianity back in the day, Gnosticism, and obviously what became, you know, Pauline Christianity, which became the Catholic Church. So I was investigating all of that, and I started going more down the mystical view of, you know, the nature of God. I know we've discussed this before, that, you know, could it be that, you know, there was this kind of all embracing kind of potentiality of everything that then became the universe and ceased to exist in its God form and became the universe, and now there's only the universe. Pandeism. So I went down the pandeistic route. Fine, that's good. I even wrote some articles for a book by Nugent Mapson.
Yes, Mapson,
he's gonna be terribly upset that I'm turning my back on pandeism, because I've got a problem with pandeism.
What is that?
A big problem with pandeism, and that is that pandeism is all or nothing. It's either you're either God or you're the universe. And when you're the universe, you're God, but you're purely in a physical form. And something has ceased to exist in order to become the other. Yes. But at the same time, it's talking about infinity and eternity. How can something cease to exist? How can something seemingly finite, because the universe supposedly will end at some point because it's physical, how can something finite come from something infinite? That, to me, doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm with you. I object to the idea that I like the pandeistic model. You remember when you introduced me to God's Debris. I love that. I absolutely love that. But I think the point you're making, and I agree with you, is that when God becomes the cosmos, God doesn't disappear. God doesn't become the cosmos and disappear. I don't think that the transcendent noumena, the thing that we call God as potential, that thing is gone when the material world is manifest.
Correct. Yeah, and that's kind of the where I started to think, I think there's a few cracks there, because then you can go down the route of Panentheism or Pantheism, where you've got you've still preserved the God bit, and the universe is either in God or two separate things altogether. That sort of makes a bit of sense. But then of course I got into the Advaita Vedanta side of things, which actually even now resonates a bit more with me, and that's the idea that you've got an absolute reality, which is called Brahman, Naguna Brahman unmanifest. And then you've got Brahman manifest, which is Saguna Brahman, which is the universe. So basically the universe is God, but it isn't in the entirety of God. It's actually God manifesting itself, but there's a greater underlying reality to it. So I'm sort of more along those lines at the moment, that whatever the universe has arisen from still exists. It hasn't gone away. It's still there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
So we do agree on this, but where I think we've ironed it out through our chats recently, which is why I think it would be great to write a paper, is our definition of God. I think there was a little bit of, I'm not sure if it was misunderstanding or just semantics. I don't see the underlying reality when it's in an unmanifest state as being anything like the traditional notion of God, as in an entity or someone that thinks or feels or even cares. Therefore, there is the underlying reality I wouldn't worship. Not because the underlying reality is not worthy of worship, but just because it doesn't give a stuff whether I worship it or not. So what's the point?
Yes. So I could take issue maybe with two things. One of them,
please do.
One of them is the unmanifest, is the God as potential, the unmanifest, not a thinking thing. Now, I don't know. I can see the possibility that, and the way I explain it to myself is something like this, that God as potential is something like the known, the knower, the subject and the object as one thing. And so when the subject and the object are one thing, there really can't be knowledge. I can't think or know anything because knowledge requires a subject to know an object, something other than myself that I can know. If God is not two things like I just described, but one thing, knowledge is impossible and thinking is impossible. So that's one possibility. But I also think about things, when I think about God as unmanifest, as potential, I think about things like the unconscious, I think about this state of I've told you about this before, but it's like a meditative state where you go into yourself, you go into the darkness, and you get rid of all of your thoughts, and you get to that blackness, that emptiness. And as you sit there with the emptiness, the only thing that dawns on you in that situation is there's still something there, right? The I, the subject, is still there. Yeah. This latent. It's like just waiting for some input, right? It's just, it's like self-awareness, primed and pregnant, and waiting for something. And even though there is nothing, and you're in this dark, empty nothingness, there's something in the nothingness. There's something that the nothingness is, and it's aware. And I wonder if that idea of God is thinking. Is it a consciousness? I don't know if it is, but it might be.
Yeah, well, I did a similar experiment after our discussion. I kind of went into a sort of meditative state, and you're right. I got to a point where there was like nothing for a brief moment, and then there was a thought, and then as soon as there's a thought, it's like initially it's like I am the nothing thinking, and then it's like very quickly it collapses into hang on, I am the thinking one.
Yes.
Yeah. So my view on this has been that there is an unmanifest nothing that doesn't care and just is all potential. I'll get onto potential in a minute. But the moment that thought arises, almost inevitable thought has to arise, at that point it's now manifest. So it's no longer the unmanifest because thinking is occurring, because thinking involves time and so forth. So it's almost like you almost can't have nothing, at least for not very long. Something arises, certainly in a meditative state. It's inevitable that something arises. But then when the something arises, you then seem to be observing the potential for nothing.
Right.
So you're kind of oscillating between these two ideas. Now, you said something along the lines of, is reality a blinking in and out of the nothing and the something? The nothing and the something.
Yes. Can I tell you where that came from?
Please.
Okay. So it wasn't exactly the nothing and the something. The way I framed it in the beginning was like being and non-being, or the infinite and the finite. It was something like that, where I was I'll just tell you, I had a mystical experience, and we've talked about this, and I've told you about it, and you know that I experimented with certain psychoactive substances to help me along with that process. Well, the first time I had one of these experiences, I took MDMA, which is I don't understand this at all, but it's a party drug. It's known as a party drug, ecstasy or Molly, they call it, that kind of thing. I got a pure version of this. I took a significant amount, and I laid on my couch, and I had this experience for a few hours. I cannot imagine being in public or around people or at a rave on this substance, but this is what the kids do. I don't understand it. But I had this moment where I was thinking, I was having these coherent thoughts, and I was actually I was writing them down on my phone. And then I had these, I was really struggling because I kept going out of that state where I was intelligible to myself. And then I would pause the writing, and then I would come back to myself and I'd start feverishly writing again so that I could try to remember this stuff. And I had this, it built in intensity. It kept building and building until I had this experience where it was almost like I was shutting and opening my eyes like a shutter on a camera. It felt like I was opening and shutting my eyes very, 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 very fast. I wasn't, but that's how it felt. My experience felt like it was turning on, like I am here in this conscious state, aware of what's here, and then I was out of it in this infinity of potential. I was not myself anymore. I was in this all-consuming blackness, and then I was back into the state that I am now, and I was God and I was man, and I was God and I was man, and back and forth, and it was this intense shuddering that kept going faster and faster and faster until I was in a sustained state as God. I was in a sustained state where I wasn't myself anymore. I was everything all at once, and it was the briefest of moments, and that something that I thought about, like I was chewing on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, trying to understand what that meant. And that brought me to ultimately the conversation you and I were having last week. So go ahead. Sorry.
Well, as you're talking about that, it's funny because I've kind of said I don't believe the Bible anymore, but still Bible verses come to mind. I think there's a scripture that in Romans, I think it is, where Paul says that he sustains all things by his power. It strikes me that certainly on a quantum level, which is, as we understand it, reality is quantum or arises from the quantum realm. It's very unstable. Things blink in and out all the time. But it's things arrange themselves in such a way, or there could be a designer that's arranged it in such a way that things have a relative stability for a period of time. Certainly when it comes to physical objects. I'm wondering whether when it comes to like our whole conscious experience, it is something along those lines where it's like the fluctuations of consciousness in and out have just stabilized out. So we've actually got a coherent kind of view of reality. I think it was Einstein, wasn't it, that once said the only reason for time is so everything doesn't happen at once. If you look at the idea of potentiality, that every single possible event down to the quantum level exists as a reality. Effectively, all you're doing, it's like still images that are pieced together in a kind of sequential order to give an illusion of a moving image. Is that what we're experiencing in reality? Is it just a case of, our minds, our consciousness is doing all the work for us? We're just filtering out all potentiality, so it seems a little bit more stable. Whereas when you're in the, using your terminology, the unmanifest God state, everything just exists. Does that make any sense at all? Or do I sound like I'm on something?
I would phrase it by saying, in the unmanifest God state, everything exists, but everything exists together.
Everything exists together, correct, yeah.
Yep. And this is the thing that I always sort of get wrapped up in, that makes me want to explain that what I'm describing when I say everything all at once is equivalent to saying nothing.
Yes.
Yeah. So everything, the potential for everything all at once existing together is equivalent to nothing. This is why atheism is a thing. This is why people can say God doesn't exist and be right, because what God is nothing. And the paradox to that is that nothing is
everything.
Something, right? Yeah. And that's what people don't understand. That's what only mystics can try to get through. That what nothing is. I use this lots of analogies, because how else can you talk about this stuff? I say that I use this analogy that God is the stem cell of being, right? That which can become anything. That's what a stem cell can become, any sort of cell at all. So I use that analogy. But there's something strange about that the unmanifest Naguna Brahman, the God is potentiality, being all possible things, all wrapped into one, and somehow that is nothing. It's like all the positive energy and the negative energy comes together and it cancels each other out, and you seem to have nothing, but that nothing is the potential for everything, and that's the paradox.
Yep. And that, right, so going to blow your mind a little bit with this. I'm not a big mathematician, but I do kind of understand my formulas and algebra and all that kind of thing. And I thought, I wonder if I can nail this down to a really simple, beautiful, short, like you get your E equals MC squared. Mm-hmm. Can I get this down? So I did a little bit of number crunching with the help of ChatGTP again. I put a few things into it. So like the idea of an absolute reality. Yeah. I put the idea of the unmanifest in, as the absolute reality. I put the idea of the manifest as being the universe, the manifest. And I put the idea of potential into there. Now, prior to this, I'd always been working on the principle that the absolute reality was potentiality. absolute reality equals potentiality, as in the possibility for anything to exist, or everything exists in the world.
I'm with you.
That's kind of what I put in, but I got something different out of it, and it's separated absolute reality from potentiality and from the manifested universe. So I ended up with 3 components to this equation. It basically boils down to the absolute reality is equal to potentiality stands on its own merit. Everything that can be multiplied, not added to, but multiplied to everything that is. Right? So the absolute reality is everything that can be, potentiality, everything that is, the universe. And not added to it. It's not everything that can be plus everything that is.
Right.
It's multiplied by it. So in other words, you take everything that is and then you multiply it by everything that can be. It's infinite. Yeah?
Yes.
And that is equal to the absolute reality.
Did ChatGPT give you mathematical symbols?
Yes, it did. It used I can't remember the name of the. Can't remember there is actually a formula to work out potentiality, and it kind of bastardized that a little bit in order to come up with this theory.
Interesting.
Or this formula.
I have a challenge.
Go on.
If you agree to get that formula tattooed on your body, I will get it tattooed on mine.
I love the idea.
I love it.
All right, I love the idea. All right, we'll have a think about that. That might be a good one.
Listen, you say the word, and I'll go get it.
All right, let's do it. Have it here.
It'll be like our
Tattoo brothers.
It'll be like blood brothers. Yeah,
I love it.
Great.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I may actually think about doing that. All I need to do is not change my mind afterwards, as in what I think the absolute reality is. Would be awful if you had a tattoo and then think, hang on a minute, the equation's wrong.
That's even better.
Yeah, so I've come up with...
If we change our mind later, we'll just put an X through it and write a new formula.
Oh, talking about X, when you were talking about everything being the equivalent of nothing, that's what I was thinking of. X.com, it's become like... There's so much going on there. It might as well be nothing because
That's a good point.
It's become like a town where someone puts a sign up saying I'm selling the best burgers, and then someone else puts a sign up that says no, I'm selling the best burgers. I'm selling the best burger. In the end, you've just got a town full of signs, and no one knows what to do anymore.
Nobody makes a goddamn burger, just signs.
Yeah. So the absolute reality is everything that can be multiplied by everything that is. So mathematically, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, if we get to the absolute reality now, you're still using the term God.
Yes.
I'm moving away from the term God. I don't like the term God.
I think this is important.
Don't like it.
I know you don't like it.
Don't like it.
And I think this is connected to your, it's connected to the same kind of resistance you have to the idea of worship. And I want to get, listen, I totally admit that my understanding of what worship means is pretty generic and probably isn't orthodox or biblical. Yours might be closer, but I think your idea of I want to talk about that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but maybe I will. You gave me a description of how you understood worship last time we talked, and I thought it was something like you owed the deity certain actions and behaviors. I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but it was almost like you owed God worship in order to sustain your life and your status as saved or something.
Yeah,
Like
so my idea of worship, certainly as a Jehovah's Witness, a religious person, let's say, is basically there's this brilliant God who's never done anything wrong. He's like perfect in all his ways. And if it seems like he's done something wrong, then that's just our imperfect understanding, because he's brilliant, you know. And he wants to be told how brilliant he is. You know, he says, I don't want you telling anyone else how brilliant they are. Tell me how brilliant I am. You won't have any other gods other than me. And then we spend our life just telling him how bloody brilliant he is. You know, we go to church and we sing songs about how brilliant he is. And I'm thinking,
did you feel like?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had to, that was some sort of religious obligation?
Yeah.
And if you didn't, it was a sin? Or you going to go to hell or something?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
If you didn't, there was no sitting on the fence. You know, if you're not for me, you're against me. You know, basically, if you don't worship Yahweh, you know, and give your entire life to him and just keep telling him how brilliant he is, you might as well worship Satan. That's kind of how extreme it was.
Do you know what that sounds like to me, Daniel?
Go on.
It sounds like, all right, so I started reading the Rig Veda because I'm a nerd, and the whole beginning of the Rig Veda is all about, it's hymns that they would say during sacrifices, these ancient Hindu sacrifices. And the idea of sacrifice was, you know, you were killing an animal and the blood offering and the life offering was being given to God, and it was being given to God as like asking God for a favor, either like for you know, your will to prevail or for forgiveness or something. It almost sounds like the way you're describing worship is like that. Like I have to give God this thing or else.
Yeah. That's how it was always a stick and a carrot, always.
That's very strange to me, and I wonder. Like Kyle was supposed to be on this podcast today, and I'm a little bit disappointed that he's not here. But he wasn't feeling good, so it's fine. But I wonder what he would say in this situation. So I do not think
you don't see worship like that. But I
never did.
Well, this is interesting because I wonder whether you're just kind of doing your own thing, which I applaud you for, because like when I look at religion, every religion I've ever come across, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, every flavour of religion is basically the same thing. If you're a Catholic, you have to go and do how many Hail Marys and tell God how brilliant he is. Otherwise, you're going to hell. Yeah. If you're a Hindu, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I mean, there's a lot of I love Advaita Vedanta, which is a philosophy within Hinduism, but like Hinduism's got 42 different hells.
Oh,
yeah, you know, and it's like if you don't do what you're told, you go to hell. You know, Islam, there's always penalties if you don't, and it just strikes me at the end of the day, it's actually just people. This is what religion is. It's just people that have written books saying this is what God wants you to do, and if you don't do it, you're going to get punished.
See, I guess the difference for me is that I never saw, and it was never explained to me this way, that lack of worship was a sin or failure to worship was a sin. So the 10 Commandments, right, tell you what things, if you do qualify as a sin, and worship isn't one of them. So it's like I never thought that worship was, first of all, I always thought, I never asked about this, but I always felt very strange about this. Like, what exactly am I giving to God by singing a song? Like, I never, you're a musical person. Yeah. You may understand this. I never understood this. I can't carry a tune. I never liked singing hymns, really. There's a couple of exceptions. Sometimes when I was, so I've had some bourbon. I know it's morning for you, but it's evening for me, and I'm drinking bourbon.
But it's all right, I'm on my third cup of tea. Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Whenever I have a reason to celebrate,
yeah,
I will sing a hymn.
Okay,
I will do it. I will do it in public.
But are you doing it to a traditional God figure sitting on a throne watching you? See, I don't think you are, because you talk about this kind of, your idea of God is not the biblical God.
Well, see, this is a really good conversation for us to have. This is it right here. You seem to think that God is a person with an ego and
well, the religious definition of God. I don't believe that now, but yes, if I was reading the Bible, I would take it that Yahweh is a God, a person with an ego and all the rest of it. And I don't deny that the Yahweh character may have existed. It may have been spirit, it may have been alien, it may have been some superhuman, whatever, a godlike figure. But I would say that if that existed, it would be just a manifestation, the same way as you are and I am and Donald Trump is, you know. And the thing is, once you introduce a manifestation in the form of a God figure that's coming from the absolute reality, a God appears out of this. It's impossible for that God to be all good. Impossible.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
And if it's just a character, it might be more powerful than me. You might say, oh, that's God. But A, it's not the absolute reality, and B, it's not all good. So why should I tell him he's brilliant all the time?
Do you think that the absolute reality? Do you think the absolute reality could judge you?
Right. Well, this is interesting because I used to think the absolute reality was potential, everything that could be. So therefore, it was in a non-entity, and it wouldn't matter whether you worshipped or not. But I'm starting to reevaluate that after our conversation and think that the absolute reality is everything that could be times by everything that is. Therefore, it's this reality. And I tend to think that this reality that I'm experiencing actually has natural laws built in. So if I act in a certain way, if I do something bad, I get consequences. So from that point of view, yeah, I wouldn't call it necessarily a conscious judging God, but there's definitely things built into the algorithm that's playing out that says if you don't live in a certain way. But you see, I wouldn't take it so far then to say, like, when you look at the Bible and it talks about, you know, homosexuality being an abomination or slavery, or it's okay to go in and kill all the Canaanites and take their young women as you know, rape them and take them home. I'm looking at that thinking, no, I'm not getting on board with that.
I'm with you.
I don't want to. This is why I can't buy into the whole Bible or religion in general, or even politics, because the minute I say, oh, I'm a this or I'm a that, I've just gone and inherited the whole thing lock, stock, barrel. I'd rather vote on policy. I'd rather vote on religious beliefs that I think, yeah, that's a good one. The Hindus have got that bit right. The Christians have got that bit right. The Muslims have got that bit right.
I agree.
But I don't want to join any of them.
I know. I think that for me, man, I think that all of the anthropomorphic things that the Bible proposes about God have always seemed to me obvious metaphors. When the Bible says that God is a jealous God, metaphor. When God is not really jealous, metaphor. When God's I don't know. I'm trying to think of some other examples. I think oh Jesus, there's a spider crawling on my desk.
Oh my God! As long as it isn't a great big huntsman like we get, the big one.
No, this was a little baby. This was a little baby Ohio spider. Nothing like you guys have. All of these anthropomorphic ideas, like God with sitting on a cloud with a long beard, God judging people, that has always seemed to me like metaphor, not literal. It shouldn't be interpreted literally. But nobody ever taught me that, Daniel. I sort of
you just assumed that, yeah. See, I wouldn't even say it's a case of like I've got resentment towards said God that is jealous or judgy or allows people to rape people and slay. I don't. There was a little kid I was talking to the other day who said, "I hate God." And I said, well, don't hate God, because God doesn't exist. The God you're hating doesn't exist. All you're left with is like a feeling of hate.
Yes.
Yeah, but the same applies, you know, worshipping God. I feel the same with that. I think what it is partly my journey into non-duality that we talk about. This blending of everything that is and everything that can be. And that realization, I've said before, I am God. And in the past, I've used that term, I am God, and you have.
Yes.
It's not even like a resentment for religion. It's just, what's the point? Like, if this universe has got its own natural laws built in and, you know, do good and good things happen, you know, who is there to worship? I know it might be edifying to go down and, you know, on a Sunday morning all sing hymns together, but couldn't you get the same thing from going to a Coldplay concert?
Absolutely. So I've told you before, but I think that my idea of worship is really can be boiled down to an expression of gratitude. And I guess what I mean is I have a gratitude for being. I have a gratitude for existence. I have a gratitude for the fact that there is this thing that exists that allows me to be and you to be, and for us to have this relationship and this conversation. It seems like a miracle. It seems like a one in a trillion possibility.
Yeah.
The fact that this exists is something that we should be grateful for. Even if your life is filled with pain and suffering, even if you're nihilist, even if there's something that the fact that you get to be a nihilist is something to be grateful about. And when I feel that gratitude, it feels good to feel it and express it. And I guess it's just dawning on me right now that when I feel that gratitude, I don't exactly think it's going anywhere. I don't exactly think that the unmanifest God is like looking at me and going,
"Yeah, well done. Yeah,
But at the same time, I feel expanded and happy to sit in that gratitude for a moment. And because, like you just said, I am God.
So how do you express that then? So in the past, it's been a case of me going down to a church, Kingdom or whatever, and saying, "Oh God, you're brilliant," and singing songs to him and praying to him, and
not like that.
So how do you? So you may be right. I may have thrown a baby out with the bathwater. I don't think it's Jesus, and I don't think it's the Bible, and I don't think it's God. Maybe what I've thrown out with the bathwater is that gratitude.
Yes,
that edifying. But how do I express that? Am I doing that when I write poetry? Am I doing that when I sing music? But who am I doing it to?
That's the thing. That's the thing I was just saying.
Yeah.
When I feel that gratitude and it feels it's such a positive emotion, and I'm just basking in it. You have to remember, I'm God feeling that. That gratitude is something I've given to myself in a manner of speaking, and that's like giving the first fruits offering to God. It's something I'm giving to God, even though the feeling that's happening in me is the gift. I don't know how to describe that. There's a scene from one of my favorite movies. Tell me, have you ever seen The Last Samurai?
No, but I'd like to. Was that Tom Cruise, wasn't it?
It's a Tom Cruise movie. So it's like a Dances with Wolves sort of situation. If you saw that movie,
yeah, that was brilliant. Really good.
But yeah, brilliant. Yeah, exactly. So there's this moment where it's not even Tom Cruise. It's one of the other characters. He's like the leader of the samurai army, and he dies in battle. And I may have told you this story before. It seems like I did. In the beginning of when he meets Tom Cruise's character, he's telling him that he's spending his whole life searching for the perfect cherry blossom. And in Japan, they have all the beautiful cherry blossoms in the spring. And he's like he's studying every single cherry blossom, trying to find the perfect one. And when he dies at the end, right, that whole comes back full circle. He gets stabbed or whatever and falls down dying. And he looks up and he sees the cherry blossoms and he says, "They're all perfect." He finally realizes they're all perfect. That moment, that's the gratitude. That's an expression of the gratitude that I'm talking about. It's just an acknowledgement of being. I don't know how to.
I think I get it. So the route I've gone down with the Advaita Vedanta, and this is a real thing, that when you reach that point of really fully appreciating non-duality, everything fades away. It almost becomes irrelevant. You know, the Hindus that practice Advaita Vedanta realize they don't need to worship Ganesha. They don't. It's just unnecessary anymore. And it's like you've reached that kind of, you've almost reached back to the absolute reality again, where everything stops being. And then you're scratching your head thinking, now what? And then it's like you have to oscillate back to that. I've got to give something to feel something.
Yes.
And even if that is going outside and looking at the sun and saying, "I love you, sun. You're amazing." Or the grass under your feet. You're brilliant. Yeah. You're actually... It's not a religious kind of worship. It's not a religious thankfulness. Yes. It's a feeling.
Yes.
That you're giving yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it, I think.
But that is that circular thing that we just talked about.
It's a circular thing.
The thing that you're giving to yourself, that is the person giving it is the manifest God, and the person receiving it is the unmanifest God, and both of them are you.
And you could say that the unmanifest God, in a sense, doesn't care, but that's not the point.
Not the point. The person, the thing capable of caring is the manifest version, right? You're the one caring. Yeah. You're the one. Well,
it's like any relationship, isn't it? I mean, we've been talking about AI relationships on our radio show recently. You know, it's perfectly possible to love an AI. The AI doesn't feel a thing.
Right.
But you're still in love with it, and you're still, you know, whatever it is you're getting back from it. So, you know, ultimately, yeah, maybe the gratitude is maybe it's a case of like just reframing what that gratitude looks like.
Yeah, I think so.
Because when you walk away from religion, it does leave you in a very empty place. You know, when your whole life has been full of all that religiosity, and it's like, now
I don't understand that to the level that you lived, man. I have to just kind of like try to put myself in your shoes there, but it's there's a gulf between you and me in that way, because I didn't live the way you lived, man.
Well, this is where these conversations that we have are valuable, because it kind of, I mean, you're still using the word God. Is there any particular reason why you favour the word God? I mean, could it not just be any other word, Brahman or source, or does it have to be the word God?
Well, to me, God means, and has always meant, that which makes reality possible, that which makes existence possible. That's another way of saying the creator. God is the creator, that which makes reality possible. And I don't see a reason to discard that word. I like it.
You like the word God. So God is the creator and the creation, the experiencer and the experience.
Yes.
And you're working on the use of the word God in Greek as theos?
Yeah, deus or theos, yes.
Deus or theos. You see, I've questioned whether, am I actually an atheist? If I don't believe in the Bible God, does that make me an atheist? Does it make me a spiritual atheist?
I don't think so.
I'm not an atheist.
But the rub for me is, maybe it's semantics again.
Yeah. I think it might be.
I don't think that you're abandoning God by saying you're a spiritual atheist, but it sounds like it, and I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah, and I think my aversion to the word God is it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't describe my idea of the absolute reality, the me being me.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
you know, I mean, to be honest, Brahman, again, it's just a word. Source, it's just a word. But the word God, it's almost traumatic.
It's ruined for you.
It's ruined. It's ruined. I hate the term God. You know, I don't hate God, but, you know, my idea of God is Yahweh. Your idea of God is not Yahweh. Your idea of God is beyond the Yahweh character, isn't it?
Well, boy, that depends.
Or is it? Because I don't like Yahweh. I think he's a genocidal maniac. Well,
here's the thing. I don't know that you have. I don't know that historically that your problem is with Yahweh. I think it's with El. Because listen, we may get too far off the beaten track on that. Let me circle back to something that I wanted to tell you earlier. You know what? There's two things I want to get to. I want to ask you about monism and how you got into that as a philosophy. But I also want to tell you what I was trying to tell you earlier when I said I had Chris Uba on the podcast and I couldn't remember what I was going to get to. It was about a book that he told me about. He told me about a book by a guy named Michael Heiser. I think it's called, I can tell you, hold on. One that I'm reading is called The Unseen Realm. Okay?
Mm-hmm. I'm writing that down.
I'm not done with it yet, but it's fantastic. One of the things Heiser does in this book is he starts getting into scripture and he pulls out all these pieces from the Old Testament where God was clearly in the flesh on earth, talking to people, eating with people, praying with people. And there's two different variations. One of them is the angel of God. The Old Testament talks about the angel of God that bears his name. But there's really no difference between the angel of God and God. And there's even like weird, the way that they talk about it, it's almost like when the angel of God is speaking, he's speaking for God, as God. But there's other instances, like when what's the character that becomes Israel? Is it Jacob? Mm-hmm. When he's wrestling with God?
Yep.
Right? He's wrestling with a human being that he doesn't know is God. He's physically wrestling with it. So there's all these different stories where God is present in the flesh as a human in the Old Testament. And nobody ever presented that to me before. And it kind of was blowing my mind a little bit. And I'll tell you why. Because if the Jews believed that God was incarnate before the time of Jesus, first of all, it begs the question why they wouldn't accept Jesus as an incarnation, the way the Hindus recognize avatars. Well, if God was in the flesh with Jacob, and he was in the flesh at Sodom and Gomorrah, and he was in the flesh in all these different instances, was that Jesus? Was that Jesus then?
Well, certainly from a JW perspective, we would have said yes. All the instances of God manifesting in the Old Testament would have been the person that became Jesus in the end. Even the fire and the smoke that went ahead of the Israelites in the wilderness, that was the overseeing angel that later became Jesus. You see, when I read Scripture, I see a distinction between El and Yahweh, insofar as certainly Genesis 1 and 2 seem to be from two different sources. One is from an Elohist source, 2 is from a Yahweh source. And I kind of went along the idea in the end that the whole El and Yahweh thing was basically a Canaanite idea that was assimilated into Judaism, which started off polytheistic.
Right.
El is either the main god El, and Yahweh was sort of an under god, or Elohim was like a council of gods, one of which was Yahweh. But either way, the whole Judaistic idea of God, the only true God is Yahweh, and is the same person as El. To me, that seems to be something that was kind of formulated and conflated together in Persian times.
So it's interesting you say that. There's a YouTube channel called Gnostic Informant that I like quite a lot. This guy, Neil, that runs it, digs into the original sources of biblical material. And one of the things he said recently that I thought was pretty crazy was that there's these people that came to the Middle East around, I think it's 1200 BC, and they called them the Sea People. Are you familiar with the Sea People?
The Phoenicians. The Philistines
are part of the Sea People.
Philistines, right? Yeah, because they took the west coast of Israel, didn't they?
Right.
Yeah.
And I've heard different stories, but one of them that's compelling is there's an island in the Mediterranean called Santorini. Mm-hmm. And there was a giant eruption in Santorini at this time, 1200 BC or something like that. And the island itself was like circular rings of islands. So there's a lot of people that say Santorini is a good candidate for Atlantis if it ever existed. Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting. But there's this giant eruption, and the people had to flee. And some of them went to Egypt, and some of them went into the Levant. And the people that settled in the southern part of what will become Judea, I think he said they were Midianites, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yep.
Those people were not Semitic. They came from the Mediterranean, and they were the ones that brought Yahweh to the Middle East.
Yep.
The Canaanites were worshiping, they were, like you said, polytheistic in the north. They had El and a bunch of other gods. Yahweh came over from the Mediterranean potentially as a basically monotheistic god, and you brought up the Persians.
Yeah.
The Zoroastrian Persians.
Zoroastrianism were monotheistic. Yeah. Which is why I think there's a whole mishmash of things going on there. And I think the Jews were polytheistic. I mean, they were worshipping Baal and Molech and, tons of others.
Asherah and all that. Yeah.
So it was, to me, it was really only around the time of the Persians when they said, we need to get this down in writing. And it needs to be monotheistic because the Persians are going to let us go back to our homeland and rebuild. We need a national identity. We need to be monotheistic. So how can we conflate all these stories down into, fragments of this and that into a story? And I think that's where you get the Torah from. I don't believe the Torah was in existence for 1,000 years before that. I think it came in. Yeah.
In fact, there's almost no evidence of Moses before that.
No evidence of Moses. I think it was all written around about 500. But you see, I still come back to this idea all the time. Paul Anthony Wallace has written some brilliant books called the Eden series of books, Scars of Eden, and basically along the lines that yes, there were Yahweh. There was an actual Yahweh character. And there was an Elohim council of characters, whether they were gods or spirits or possibly more likely even aliens or higher life forms.
Mm-hmm.
still come back to that time and time over, that whatever they were manifestations, instances of probably the absolute reality. And there was good about them and bad about them, just the same way as there is with humans. You know, I mean, whether or not these higher life forms that were manifestations actually, or one of them actually created the universe, you're starting to get into the Gnostic idea with the demiurge, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
You know, it could even be along those lines. But do I worship the Yahweh character? No, because I think some of his ethics and morality, if he exists or did exist, is dubious. I would not, you know, some good stuff, but I don't want to follow an individual manifestation as if it were the entirety.
But let me ask you this question, Daniel. Do you think that the unmanifest God, I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, but do you think that the unmanifest God communicates? Like, do you think revelation is a thing? And if you do you think that the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, are candidates for such a thing?
Only from a perspective of it being part of the manifestation, insofar as it's basically just God, using your term, talking to himself and thinking things through. Basically, isn't everything inspiration? When I write a piece of music, you know, it might be good, it might be crap, but it's, you know, it's coming from me and it's going to me.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think, you know, in the Bible, I think, yes, it's probably as inspired as any other piece of literature, you know, as indeed Tale of Two Cities is, or any sort of literature. And there's good and there's bad. There's good and there's bad in it. I don't think like the Hebrew prophets are probably a good example, or the Bible in itself is probably a good example of a piece of literature that you should take lock, stock, barrel as a good idea for living your life, necessarily. You know, it's a bit like you listen to music. You know, I listen to a beautiful piece of music and I say, oh, that's inspirational, that is. And then someone will play a piece of like thrash metal or death metal or something, yeah? That's terrible. Yeah, but it's still coming from wherever that creative place is, isn't it?
Daniel, can you play anything you want on your radio show?
Can I play anything I want on my radio show?
Any song you want?
Technically, yeah.
One of these days, I'm
licensed
to join you for your radio show. And
please do, yeah.
Play my music to the Australians.
It's not thrash metal, is it?
Oh, there might be one or two.
Oh my god!
I want to make you listen to the.
Right, well, we're definitely going to have you on the show.
I love that idea.
2 hours of fun,
Daniel. We are over 2 hours.
We are,
and I really don't know. We didn't get to oscillatory non-dualism. We didn't get to. I wanted to know. Because one of the things you said to me, and we may not have time for this, you tell me. Is that,
I've got time if you don't need to go anywhere. I've got time to carry on talking.
All right, let's do one more topic, and that is, I'm curious.
Let's do it. Let's go for a Joe Rogan 3 hour.
I think if I did, my wife might be upset, unless she's falling asleep upstairs, which is possible. So one of the things you said is that you went from Pandeism to Advaita Vedanta, and you and I kind of did that together because I knew a bit about Hinduism, but not until you and I started talking about it more deeply did I start reading it more and getting into it more. And I noticed how much it aligned with my own thoughts. But then you got into Monism recently, and I don't know where that came from, what specifically, if it was a particular, was it Bertrand Russell's monism? Was it some kind of ancient monism? Like, how did this come about? And I'm curious how it is that you think Advaita Vedanta is different from monism, because I'm not sure that they are.
I'm not sure they are. Right, so this is going to make you cringe. My old friend ChatGTP again. I went in there and I said, like, is there a word for someone who thinks this? And I put all my stuff in. Monist? Well, yeah, it came back with, it sounds awfully like you're kind of a monist or somewhere in the secular spiritualist, possibly Advaitist sort of area. Yeah, and I say, "Oh, monism. What's monism?" At its core, monism is an attempt to say that everything is unified. That's effectively it. You then get into various different levels of monism, like substantive monism, secular monism, spiritual monism, and so forth, where you're actually getting into what is the substance of the everything that is. The underlying substance. Is it body? Is it mind? Is it purely physical? Is it consciousness? And so on. I'm not entirely sure I've settled on what flavour of monism at the moment, because, you often talk about all is mind, and that's sort of heading towards a panpsychic idea. I wonder if mind is actually a manifestation itself. Consciousness is a manifestation. So that's... Yep. Technically not the substance, it's a result of the substance. For me. It's tricky, isn't it?
This is tricky because I don't know if you could be right that mind is a manifestation, and if it is, it's not Nirguna Brahma, it's not Goddess potentiality.
Yeah.
But it's possible that mind is the thing we mean when we say the unmanifest potential. Let me
I have to look at my tattoo. Hang on.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
When I close my eyes and close your eyes, Daniel, and picture the Earth, spinning around the sun and the blackness of space, and just allow yourself to just sort of pass by the Earth and out into the blackness until you don't see any stars anymore, and it's just black. I wonder if that is identical to getting yourself in a spaceship, flying past the Earth out into space until you're floating in darkness. What I mean is the darkness of our mind and our imagination, is it identical to outer fucking space? I'm serious. This is a serious question. Is it possible that when we look out at space, this is mind space, the same as the imagination, but the mind space out here is God, right? Is the mind of God. Could that be the potential that we're talking about? I don't know, but maybe. What do you think?
I've done similar experiments, like thought experiments, where I've tried to get to an absolute state of nothingness. You've got to get rid of everything, though. You can't just get rid of the stars and planets and be left with empty space. You've got to go, because there's still direction. There's still up, there's still down, there's still left, there's still right. And all the while you've got that, there's still the potential for conscious thought. One thought comes.
Is there still up and down, left and right when it makes no difference? It doesn't make a distinction.
It doesn't make any difference. There's no distinction, but yes, technically there's still, all the while you're within a space itself. You've got to go back one level where there's no dimensions at all. So no third dimension, no second dimension, no first, just no dimension. And that is kind of my idea.
You travel in is identical. Is that the same as no dimensions at all?
Well, the fact that you can travel becomes an issue. This is where this is what got me basically going down the rabbit hole when I was a Jehovah's Witness, is that my dad always used to say, oh, God is sitting on a throne in space somewhere, floating around, And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because space is created. Space is a manifestation. Space has got left, right, up, down. If God is out there somewhere, I could get in a rocket, and if I lived a long enough time and my rocket went on, I could reach the place that God is. That doesn't make sense.
No.
God needed to, if God exists, needed to exist before not just things in the universe were created, but the actual universe itself. The minute you take the universe away, you've now not got dimension. So God is not just spaceless, he's dimensionless.
I'm just not sure if that's different than all the dimensions together.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know, but that's kind of what started me down that track, and that's what's led me through Christianity to Pandeism to Advaitism, and now sort of just knocking on the door of Monism. I want to know what the substance is.
Me too.